delighted to have the opportunity to talk to Professor Friedrich Loerzel this afternoon. My name is Caroline Mansky and I'm a lecturer at the Institute of Criminology, University of Cambridge, and Friedrich and I are research colleagues. We have been in the past and we are still. Our conversation is taking place at the European Society of Criminology Conference in Cardiff, September 2017. Professor Loerzel is an emeritus professor and past director at the Institute of Criminology, Cambridge University, and at the Institute of Psychology, Friedrich Alexander University, Erlangen-Nuremberg in Germany. He is also a senior professor at the Berlin Psychological University, a senior fellow of psychology at Erlangen-Nuremberg, a member of Wolfson College, Cambridge, and a chartered forensic psychologist. So Friedrich, you have had a long and distinguished career in criminology. Can I ask you, how did it all start?
Thank you very much for carrying out this interview with me, because I know it needs some preparation. Thank you for investing the time. I know what I have done, so I had to invest less time than you. I am a criminologist, but I sometimes make the joke a hobby criminologist, because most of my life I was a psychologist. I started in psychology. I got my diploma in psychology at Erlangen-Nuremberg, and the diploma is a bachelor and master's in one integrated degree. And I never had really a plan about becoming a criminologist, but then I got an offer for the job in the Advanced Research Center of the German Research Foundation on socialization and communication. And one of these professors, it was interdisciplinary, one of these professors hired me, and I started research on delinquency, because he had a project on juvenile delinquency. Later on, I also did my PhD in this field and did other projects, and always followed topics of crime, violence, etc. over my whole career. The first project was on juvenile delinquency, and then my PhD was a very early self-control theory of crime. Unfortunately, only in a German book, so it was not so well received as Gottfriedson and Hirschi, because nobody in the US had read it. And then we did, very early, I also moved to some projects, always with a direct practical application. We did a study on prison officers, attitudes, punitiveness, etc. And also a training of prison officers. We developed a small program, how to improve their behavior against the prisoners, and we did a randomized controlled trial on that, whether it works or whether it didn't work.
So what drew you into working in an applied way? What was the interest there?
I must say parts of social sciences are extremely interesting, but sometimes a little away from daily life. And my feeling always was, when you have an insight, when you found something, you should also try to implement it in practice. And this has led me to do evaluation research, to develop programs, and I'm involved in many practice-oriented activities. I also did some expert evidence in court cases, etc. So I think also we are doing basic research. We also need or should do some applied research as well, because we have a service also to the society. They are paying our salaries. Now mine no longer, I am an emeritus, but I still get the pension from the state.
So do you find any challenges in working with practitioners and policymakers?
No. The only challenge that I realize repeatedly, they want quick answers, they want simple answers, and when it is more than 2 or 3 variables included in a recommendation, they may have difficulty. But this is plausible. Human beings are not, when it comes to action, always able to check so many variables that some of the researchers have in their Liswell models or whatever it is. So we need to try to make things as simple as possible, but without making it too simple. So some people who are very close to the media, they have these one variable explanations. The reason is the family, the reason is poverty or whatever. I think this is not appropriate. But it is also not very helpful for practitioners if things get too complex, so they cannot transform it into action. And with regard to policy makers or politicians, I think it's not identical because some politicians never make any policy. It is important to look always, is there a window of opportunity when you can bring forward your research? When you produce research and send it to policymakers, it often ends up in a drawer of the secretary or something like that. But when there's a window of opportunity, I think we can have an impact. I have a very brief story, a case of a sexual offender in Germany. I was already in Cambridge at this time. He was released 2 years early because all experts found he was doing well. He was treated. He had formerly raped a woman, knife, and then he came out, and within 2 weeks he raped again a woman, threatened with a knife, and now he killed her. And this was the wife of a prison officer. So absolute nightmare, because at this time the new Bavarian prison law was in the parliament. And of course a number of parliament members said, here you see, rehabilitation of these people is not worthwhile. And the Bavarian Minister of Justice, they held a workshop where some practitioners and we as researchers could present what do we know about sex offender treatment. And later on she defended. She said this was a case, it was not a very good case, but she even established a small research unit to have better data available. If we would have sent our data in 2 years before, I think it would have not changed anything.
So it's capturing the moment.
Capturing the moment, a window of opportunity, then we can have an influence on policymakers.
And you've talked a little bit about your work on sex offending, and I haven't asked you, how has your research interest developed over your career?
Oh my goodness, how long do you have? Because I have many interests. I sometimes am a little jealous to colleagues who have one topic their whole life, because then it's more easy to get all things read and so on. So from this early research I have just mentioned, I moved over. I always ask myself, when you explained juvenile delinquency in a large study, a large amount of outcomes is not explained by your variables or your conditions, family and so on. And then after Sir Michael Rutter in London, we did the second study on resilience in Europe, because resilience asks the question, why does somebody not become delinquent? And why a delinquent youngster or a man or a woman desists after some time. So this was already in the 80s. Desistance now is a very popular topic in criminology, but looking to the other side of the coin, what protective factors may help, this was at this time very challenging, and it is a very difficult area. I also was interested in different kinds of violence, school bullying, football hooliganism. I like football, I don't like hooliganism, but at this time there was a lot of literature saying, oh, these hooligans, they are normal people, they only want to act out their aggressiveness at the weekend. I never believed in that. So we did, I think, a very comprehensive study in Germany on real hardcore hooligans, having done 70, 80 fights or so. And it was like an undercover, because we could not know their names and so on, and got the whole case. And what finally turned out, they are more or less, quotation, typical violent people, also violent in other areas, often have a criminal record. But the ringleaders seem to be, from the personality, the most antisocial, but they are clever. They are less often caught than the other ones. So football hooliganism. Then we did research on treatment of other offenders. This was in the 80s. We had a project and we wrote a book on social therapeutic treatment of offenders in Germany. At this time, rehabilitation was nearly dead, because it was a consequence of the nothing works doctrine and so on. And I wrote in the preface, okay, at the moment there will be not much media attention for this research, but it will come up again because this is an ongoing topic in criminology. How can we change these people who have done for a long time very bad things? But many of them can go back to a more or less normal life. Then we did research on, one research interest was also on school bullying. School bullying was mainly seen as a school phenomenon, and coming from criminology and general violence research, we also thought this has to do with other kinds of violence. This has to do with delinquency, and we found out, and later on we had done some research showing that they go on, and even after 10 years, the real serious school bullies who are mobbing their school friends, they are serious criminals in many cases. So these are various topics. We may talk about current research later, or
we can talk about it later. I mean, I'm interested in picking up the fact that you've spent some of your time doing research in Germany and some of the time in the UK, and I just wondered if you could give your views on how the work and preoccupations of criminologists in both countries differs.
Yeah, it's a huge difference because in UK I could become officially a criminologist. In Germany this would not have been possible because in Germany all chairs for criminology are in law faculties and they require a law degree. This is one of our big problems of criminology in Germany, because many are not so competent in methods. They have to train themselves when they are lawyers. And we have recently, of the German Society of Criminology, where I was once president, we have developed a memorandum about the situation of criminology in Germany. In UK, you know, in Cambridge, we are also in the law faculty, but we are accepted members of the law faculty even when we are psychologists, sociologists, or whatever by training. And this is a serious difference. Another difference is that, in my view, that the British criminology is a little more politically oriented than the German criminology. It may also have to do with the law backgrounds. And a serious problem is also that we have a more centralized government in England, Wales and so on. So there is more money put into research from the government, whereas in Germany, justice system, etc., is governed by the states, the Länder, and we have 16. So they only have small research institutions and not so large research grants. I recently got a large grant from the Bavarian Ministry of Justice, but this is untypical. So I would say the situation in UK, and I wrote even an article in a German journal about that, is better for criminology. Also, we are also suffering some financial problems over the last decade.
And thinking about then more broadly about criminology in Europe, how would you say, from your experience of sort of working in different countries, would you say that there are similar dynamics playing out in terms of funding and in terms of the intervention or involvement of politics in these other countries too?
No. I think in Europe we have a rather heterogeneous situation. Let me give you one example. We carried out recently a European project. The name was STAR, Strengthening Transnational Application to Reduce Reoffending, or Programs to Reduce Reoffending. And the focus was young offenders, domestic violence perpetrators, and drug-dependent offenders. And the project contained two parts. One was that we looked what are the systematic outcomes of the programs in the different countries. And the other one was a large survey in 27 European countries. What kinds of programs do you have in these different fields? And it was an important project in my view because we got really a large data set from Europe. But what was disappointing, with the exception of 7 countries, and UK was leading, Netherlands, Sweden, a little bit from Germany, and so on, many countries have not had any systematic evaluation of the programs. They implemented some of the programs, also with the help of the European Union, but there is not yet really an established culture of evaluation, process evaluation, outcome evaluation, and so on. So I think this is an important issue also of European Society of Criminology to help to promote the standards in the whole European Union. What I would also say in Europe is that there is still some language difference. I was founding president of the European Association of Psychology and Law 25 years ago, long ago, and we found that it is still, English is not yet so prevalent as a routine language, and as you realize, your English is also much better than mine, so it's good that you are my interviewer. And this must be improved over time. The young ones are now really better, but take law. In many countries, they do not need to read English papers because it's a national law. Many national laws are oriented to German penal law, and the Anglo-American system is different. So there are huge differences, and we should not neglect these differences. But on the academic level and on the practical implementation level of programs and of interventions and so on, we should try to make it more homogeneous, and I think this is one of the challenges in the future.
Mm. And I mean, I'm interested to hear your views about the debates that have developed over sort of research which is focused on interventions and the so-called what works sort of debate, if you like, and the slightly different sort of angle that's been taken with desistance theory. How do you see those two sort of debates or areas of work combining?
I don't see any basic contradiction. We had discussions in various conferences and with Chad Maroon and others, and I think desistance, as we already investigated the context of resilience and protective factors, is something that happens more or less in the natural environment of the person. So by social factors, also by personal factors, decision making, sometimes again recidivism. And what is the duty of the criminal justice system? To help people to desist. So the What Works movement is, for me, I could use the word desistance as well, help people to desist. And as you know from our work, for instance, helping families to help offenders to desist is an important issue. So yeah, it is a typical situation in science, not only in criminology. You must create something as an icon. Oh, we are doing that, and we are different from the others. This helps to get research grants. This helps to shape an own community and so on. But I think we have good collaboration between two fields, and we must strengthen the natural context in which people desist, and strengthen, for instance, a number of programs really try to teach offenders how to avoid situations where they not going out every Saturday night in a pub and being drunk and so on. If he decides by himself, all the better. But if he reflects upon what he has learned in a program and saying, okay, and if the wife says, if you go out again and come home fully drunken, then I will no longer cook your preferred food and so on. So I think both developments are relatively close and should even come closer together.
And you mentioned a little bit about our research, and so perhaps could you say what you're currently working on and what your current research interests are?
So my current largest project is still the Erlangen-Nuremberg Development and Prevention Study. This is a study of more than 600 families and their children. We started at preschool age, and the part is only a longitudinal, so a typical developmental approach, but starting early. And we are now following up over 12 years or so. And but the other part is a prevention approach, a universal prevention, So we developed a program for parents on positive parenting, a program for children on child skills training, social skills training, and we also evaluated a combination of both, because from a theoretical perspective, we thought targeting two areas where the risks come from is better than only targeting one. And we have some positive results, even after 10 years, some not so bad results, but of course not big bang effects. This study led us also coming back to the issue of practice, because we were government funded. It's not a commercial thing, it's a non-profit, but as we did not find negative outcomes, so that people got worse, like in the Cambridge Somerville Youth study by John McCord, we disseminated the program now nationwide and have trained 1,600 or even more preschool educators, so they can implement the program in their own kindergarten or preschool. Another study is part of a European consortium. It's called Proton. I cannot remember the exact definition of this. And we are doing one part, only a small part. It's a very large study. And we're doing something on protective factors against extremism, terrorism. I would not go so far because no real terrorists have been yet involved. And look, we know something about risk factors in this field. Left-wing extremism, right-wing extremism, faith-based extremism, jihad and so on, Islamistic. And we know not very much about protective factors. Protective factors is very difficult to define and so on. And we are now in the first phase of our project. And we have just finished, I need to write the report at the weekend, a systematic review on research on protective factors. Another study is, together with you, I'm very happy to be co-PI, you are doing most of the work, I do little. It is a continuation of our previous study on prisoners and their families. And it was also, in my view, highly innovative, because we did the first study in Europe with a whole family approach. That means we interviewed and assessed various other issues of the prisoners when they were in prison and a half year afterwards. And we also did the same with the children and with the female partners. They may not have been always married, some even are divorced, but they had at least contact. And this study is a correlational study, it's not an intervention study, but it found that good family ties during incarceration and visits, for instance, number and quality of visits, has an impact on the resettlement, particularly on alcohol consumption, drug consumption, social relations, not on financial issues and not on employment. So these are two different aspects. The third study currently is evaluating sex offender treatment in Bavaria. We have specialized sex offender treatment, and we have not yet much systematic empirical knowledge. And as we have recently seen in June, when a report in UK came out and was in all newspapers and BBC, we cannot always be sure that even the most intensive treatment leads to the results. It's a difficult area, and we are doing now something similar in Bavaria. We have another smaller study on treatment of young sexual offender and young violent offenders in social therapeutic prisons. But these are ongoing projects. They are not yet finished. We hope we get results that are encouraging this approach and not discouraging.
So you have quite a wide range of experience and had a number of opportunities to see research, criminological research in various areas. So I'm going to ask you for your insights based on that broad perspective that you've had over your career. And I think, first of all, just to sort of some general reflections on the field of criminology and the issue of interdisciplinarity. and the extent to which, I mean, you're a psychologist, you talk about working with sociologists and others. How do you see that sort of working relationship playing out?
Yeah. It is often a lip service. Oh, we are interdisciplinary. We have reflected a lot in many areas about these issues over the last 25, 30 years. Some people say transdisciplinary is already good. I have always worked, also I was head of a psychology department with other disciplines, with lawyers, with sociologists, from my beginning, because I forgot to say, after the special advanced research center in socialization and communication, I later on was also project director in another one on prevention and intervention. And these were also sociologists, lawyers, educational scientists, and so on. But it is not enough to bring different disciplines together. Some part of interdisciplinary must go on in your own head. That means you must read these journals, you must talk to the people, you must draw your own conclusions, you must try to integrate theoretical thinking from other disciplines in your own approach to a crime or to violence phenomenon. And what is also very important in my view is that you aim to bring your more or less limited competence in fields where you get in contact, as you mentioned before, with practitioners or with policymakers. A very important experience in my life was being a member, for a short period, chairing the accreditation and advisory panel of the Minister of Justice in England and Wales. Because you see how different the approaches of different disciplines to this area is. But when you have a good personal relation, I would also emphasize this needs to be part of it. I think you can find a consensus when you look at a program, when you rate a program. Is it a good, is it not so good, what criteria and so on. There are different things in the minds of the people, and you can discuss this, and I personally feel criminology made good progress. You are too young to remember when psychiatry had their claims, psychology, sociology, and the sociologists say they have the wrong method, and the psychologists say they are not quantitative enough, or whatever, you know, these stereotypes. I think this has substantially improved, and I also feel ESC made a contribution to that, bringing people together. However, we must be aware that we still have these core groups, sociology, basics, we call them criminologists, but their thinking is sociology, or is law-oriented, or is psychology-oriented. We still have some problems with integration of psychiatrists and now brain research. I did some work in my life also on personality disorder, so-called psychopaths, a very tricky term in Germany due to our Nazi background. And I'm not recommending you jumping on every flavor of the month or using, but of course, brain research and neurobiological research has to tell criminology something. But when you look at conferences, they are totally underrepresented. They go to medical conferences, they go to psychiatry conferences, or forensic mental health. This is sometimes separate communities. And this is why in psychology and law, we have organized in 2015 the World Conference on that topic. We also want to bring in criminologists in, because we need to learn from each other and cannot restrict the work only to eyewitness testimony or something like that. It's important. And you need speciality. So I think this interdisciplinary and also scientific, practice-oriented aspect is one of our key challenges and also strengths when we are doing it well.
And you mentioned the ESC as sort of acting to try and bring these disciplines together, and I wondered if you could talk a bit about your involvement with the ESC.
My involvement in the ESC is, in my view, moderate. I'm more or less regularly attending the conferences, organizing a working group, giving a talk. I was, I think, a board member of the journal. I was on the advisory board committee of 1 or 2 conferences. One of my younger co-workers won the Young Scholar Award last year. Very happy about that. Also, he moved to Berkeley after Cambridge. So I have a lot of things to do. I think I cannot bring in much more, but it is. I'm regularly there. What is a problem now is we have so many, when you are psychologist and criminologist and have to serve practice, you have so many conferences or lectures to give. Next week I'm again in Cardiff, giving a talk to NOTA. This is an association on sex offender treatment. Then is the German Criminology Conference. Then the Psychology and Law Conference, the national. So it is a large number. And sometimes it can become too much. They are all packed in September. So this is an issue we should also perhaps sometimes reflect, because there are so many things going on. And ESC, I think, must of course also always reflect financial issues, because some of the East Europeans do not have the same, but we give support as far as I know, so there are funds for supporting some younger scholars.
And so how would you like to see the ESC develop in the future?
I think the people who are on the steering committee and the president is doing well, and we should, I think, try to get some of these disciplines I mentioned before, to attract them also to our meetings. But otherwise, one could think about divisions like the American Society of Criminology. They have a number of divisions. I am currently chairing the Development and Life Course division, and what else? The Academy of Experimental Criminology. But we have already so many task forces in the European. So there is always the risk in a society, I experience this with the European Association of Psychology and Law, to keep the balance between some kind of fragmentation and some kinds of differentiation. So differentiation is good on the one hand, but the overall society should not become fragmented. It's a genuine criminology society.
And we've talked about the ESC, and you've mentioned the ASC in America. And I wonder if you had any views on sort of if you think about criminology globally, and other areas where criminological research is taking place, and the extent to which we do have that sort of global perspective.
ESC was established because a number of Europeans felt, oh, we meet at ASC, but not at a nearer place in Europe. And then this initiative came up that I highly appreciated. But when you talk about criminology globally, it is of course not restricted to Europe and North America. I have some good contacts to Australian criminology. I also have given a talk once there, and New Zealand. But we have Asian criminology. I gave several times talks. I think one was a Chinese criminology conference. And this is developing. But there's still a different orientation, also a little more law-oriented, still less using our empirical methods. And I think these are also challenges ASC and ESC should face, because Africa, South America, we have colleagues in Cambridge, as you know, from Africa, and one moved to South America, and I think they are doing important work in promoting criminology and criminology thinking. And that means in practice, for instance, in Africa, trying to help to improve prisons, trying to do something that we do, you cannot transfer it one-to-one, but you can try to implement basic principles. And also in South America, countries are different. They are not all far behind, but they need support and help to really promote criminology globally. Together with the ASC, I don't see any serious problems. Some of the American colleagues are coming to our conference. My observation is more are coming when the conference is in Porto, because it's a nice venue. Many more will come to Florence in a few years, but when it is a cold, windy city somewhere, not so many will come from America. But these are things you realize in every scientific society.
Yeah. And can I ask you a little bit about the demographic makeup of criminologists? And I want to ask you, I mean, if you look at the demographic makeup, some might say that we need to pay greater attention to gender issues. What are your views on that?
I was recently on an appointment committee for a chair, and the Equal Opportunity Officer always asked this question. And the answer of most candidates was a trivial, most of our clients are men. Females, there is some increase, and we have some seriously delinquent women, and some of them are not yet, in many countries, according to my observation, appropriately served, because they are sort of relatively small group. So programs are at first developed for the large group. And
yes, you're talking.
But I'm talking about the other issue that is in your question, the issue of criminologists, not the
so when you talked about delinquent women, I thought
delinquent women. Not all female criminologists are delinquent, of course. Only a very small minority, as I assume. No, of course we have, like in many disciplines, at the higher end of the career, we have many more males. However, my prediction, it is a long-term prediction, let's say 10 years or so, not next year. It will be more or less equal. Why? I looked around, because I anticipated your question as a female interviewer, at the coffee break this morning. And there were 28 women and 24 males only in this room. I counted them. And females, psychology, my original discipline, are now 85%, sometimes 90% of the starters of studying psychology are females. Why? Because they have the better grades, so they get more easily accepted. They are more interested in psychology, of course. And we have the same in law, that more and more females go into law, and we have the same in criminology. There were times when you look at the photos of the staff at Cambridge, in former times there were a few females for decoration, I cynically say. Now we have a substantial number of females. The problem is a more general one. When the females go on, when they become research assistants, when they become perhaps lecturers, many get children, and then they want to go part-time. So we need better schemes in countries to help females to really go on then with their job and climb up the ladder to higher careers. But I don't see a principal obstacle to that, and I'm very optimistic that this will. Look to our current project, females only. I'm the only.
You're the token male.
The second, do we have another one?
No. You are the token
so
male.
I'm isolated. No, I like to collaborate with females, and in psychology now you mainly have females in your teams, it depends a little bit on the field they are working in. In methods there are still a little more males, but I am confident about that. And we need, of course, promotion support, but this will be reduced.
Yes. And can I ask you sort of generally for your thoughts about the future of criminology and where it's going? Can I sort of split you up, your answer up, if I may, into thinking about different research topics and focuses of research, but also thinking about research methods and the developments that might be relevant there?
I personally think that the research topics cannot, on the long term, predict it. For instance, I worked with the German Department for Asylum and Refugee asylum seekers and migrants 10 years ago, several years, some training and counseling with them. Then at this time this was a very, very hot topic, but then it declined over time and we had only a small number. Now it is an absolutely hot topic because we have so many people, and the same in UK because of the terrorist acts. We had some years ago, you may remember, these people at the Horn of Africa who captured huge tankers. So phenomena come up, and then criminology needs to provide knowledge on that. What I don't recommend is that we always, when some, for instance, I remember school shooting. We had this country, we had in America. Then the politicians get active. We must do something. Then some programs are developed, and then researchers get grants, and of course we'd like to get grants. But then the research is often short-term, and then the topic again disappears. And what I would like really to get in the future of criminology, more integrated and long-term approaches, maybe to prevention, but also maybe to theory development. Criminology after the Second World War had the development. At first we had the old traditional armchair criminology, a lot of theories. Our small discipline of criminology has volumes of 1,500 pages or so on theory. But they are often a little fragmented. We need more integration of the theories. After this phase of more or less non-empirical criminology, we had a strong expansion of empirical studies, longitudinal studies, evaluation studies, and so on. And now we need, in my view, a phase not giving up the empirical basis, but theoretical integration, transdisciplinary theories, multi-level theories. But you mentioned methodologies.
I did, yes.
I would not recommend that it must always be the most sophisticated statistical method, because sometimes these papers, I taught statistics for some time early in my career, but sometimes it's very difficult to figure out what was really found in some of these studies. And some colleagues and I myself are of the opinion, when we really have a clear result, and this means also a replicable result. This is currently a topic given by Johnny Ward, actually it's just published. It must be clearly replicable. My saying is, would you drive over a bridge with a car when you know, okay, 90 bridges of this type are solid, but then 10 have broken over the last 20 years? You would not drive. These are many of our messages. Oh, in general it's okay, but. And we must get a more differentiated knowledge. For instance, I would drive over a bridge when I know that when they broke down, this was heavy storm, this was overloaded vans or whatever on the bridge. So we must differentiate our theories and integrate our approaches, and also the same with our research methods.
And what about the training and development of criminologists? How do you see that working at the moment?
I do not know many programs. I know some programs, and some have more an accent in theoretical approaches, some have more accent in practical issues. I think you must combine it. This also has to do how long the training is. If it is a typical 1 year master's course, sometimes the methods training cannot be very intensive, it takes longer time. And also they should get in contact with students with practical problems, but they can later on make a choice. At the moment in criminology, many alumni from good universities go into research. But of course we also need to promote those who want to go and practice and, for instance, do interventions, work in prisons and so on. And what I also think, what is also better in UK than it is in Germany, there may be a chance of coming back. So We have, for instance, in UK, some people are working in practice and they come back to academia. Even some from the Minister of Justice went to academia, so have this better exchange. The training depends very much how much time you have. When it's only 9 months teaching, many things are on the surface. If you have more time, but it depends on the system, when they have criminology as a bachelor's degree and then come to a master's degree, I think you can do different things with them in comparison when somebody comes from English language and enters an empirical discipline like criminology. It's also better for psychologists or sociologists who have already a good methods training. And this is something I really think is important. Criminology always had a little bit the problem that we easily mix our political opinions with empirical findings. And you can evaluate findings differently, and we must be cautious to disentangle both. When are we speaking to practice and to policy making as citizens with a political attitude or opinion, and when are we objective researchers and try to tell us the truth? The absolute truth is always difficult.
So, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think you'd like to say to future criminologists about their work?
I can only learn from my own experience. And as mentioned, I was in psychology. I had too many broad topics to cover, to cope with, from clinical assessment, evaluation, and so on, forensic psychology. It somehow happened. And what I currently realize is that we all give advice to students, what you must do to make a good career. I think life is cannot so easily planned. And sometimes things come up. If you are interested, do what you are interested. Of course, listen also to others, what they tell you. But there is no strategic plan for life. I had recently given a talk about, from our other project, to the Association of Parents in Bavaria, and then a mother raised her hand and asked me at the end, "Oh, Professor, there's now the children are so under stress, and what should I do that my child gets the right school career?" My first question was, "How old is your child?" She said 6. And I think this mother may create a problem when she has this impetus of planning a life for a child. Of course, you should do the best what you can, but it's not always plannable. And also a young criminologist, I think if she is good and interested and motivated, they will make the way.
Okay, well, thank you, Friedrich.
Thank you very much.
And that's, I think, a good moment to sort of conclude our conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.